All right, in this video, I'm about to share with you the 3 biggest mistakes that I've made as a real estate investor so far. Now, the challenge of this video is not coming up with 3 massive boneheaded mistakes. The challenge is narrowing down to just 3 because I've made a lot of mistakes over the years. So here's the 3 biggest ones that I can think of, and hopefully you'll learn from this, you'll hear this and you'll learn from it, and you can avoid making the same mistakes. I'm Kirby Atwell, and this is Living Off Rentals, where we believe a high quality rental property is the best investment a person can make. So today I have the pleasure of sharing with you 3 of my most painful lessons that I learned over the years in hopes that you can avoid the same landmines. And so if you get value out of this, I'd really appreciate it if you like the video. Hit subscribe, hit the little notification button, and you'll get notified of other videos like this because I'm really laying out the pain on this one. I'm gonna start with a doozy. My first big real estate investing mistake has to do with contractors. Now, I've made a lot of mistakes over the years when it comes to working with contractors, let me tell you. But I think this first one, I'm gonna go way back here. This first one, I think a lot of people could learn from, especially if you're just starting out. There's a lot of key takeaways, a lot of lessons here. So the year was 2012, late 2012, early 2013. Young real estate investor, Kirby, just starting out. This was my 4th project. It was a big one. The renovation estimate was coming in at $125,000. So this was the biggest rehab that we had done to date. We're converting a multifamily, a 3-unit, into a big single family home in a higher end area. So we were biting off a lot on this one. I was working with a contractor who I had worked with on 3 previous projects. So I sort of had a warm and fuzzy about this guy. He had done well on the previous 2 projects. This was his 3rd one. So this particular contractor bid pretty aggressively on this project. He really wanted this job. He was still hurting financially from the '08 downturn, and he just really needed the work. So we get into the project, we get about halfway through the project, and that's when all the problems started. He was behind on the schedule, he wasn't getting the work done, he wasn't showing up on a daily basis like he had said he was going to, and ultimately he needed more money. So we sort of muddled through for a little while until eventually I realized that this project had just stalled out and that we weren't really making much progress, and we needed to develop a new plan and come to a new agreement. So I had him come in to our office, we sat down in the conference room for about a half day, and we went through all the numbers in detail. We went through the timeline and the payments and really got on the same page. We developed a really solid plan going forward and came up with a new strategy. And I knew it was going to cost me a little bit more, but at least we had a new plan in place and we're going to get it done. So I thought we were all on the same page. And so up to this point, really, there weren't any major issues, but this is where the real fun started. So part of the agreement was that he told me he needed a payment so that he could just get the drywall crew there. They could buy all the drywall, all the materials they needed, and have a little bit of money for labor up front so that they could really start moving. And so he told me he needed about $20,000 for this to just get the project going again. And once that goes, then the rest of his guys could be doing other things. And so I bought into this. So I paid him the $20,000. And as you can guess, I drove up there a couple days later up to the north suburbs of Chicago where this project was, and I was expecting to see this whole crew of drywallers there and the project just, flowing. And when I showed up, not only was the crew not there, but all the tools, all the materials, everything was cleaned out of the house. It felt like I had been slapped in the face. I instantly knew that I was screwed. I knew this guy, I wasn't gonna see him again. I knew he had taken the money that I paid him and I wasn't gonna see the money again. But what I didn't know is that previous to that, he hadn't been paying the guys that he had hired to do the work at my house. And I also didn't know that a lot of the work that he had done was really kind of half-assed. It was just enough to get by, to get paid more, but it really wasn't quality work that I could actually stand behind and sell when I sold the project. So I ended up having to do things like rip out brand new engineered hardwood floors because underneath it was just garbage. He hadn't put down the plywood that needed to go underneath the hardwood. So not only did I have to, he took the $20,000, I had to pay the other contractors that he had hired because his plan all along was to just screw them when he took off. And then I had to do more work. So all in all, it cost me about $70,000 extra that I hadn't planned on spending because this guy his plan was to get as far ahead as possible to where I wasn't paying attention and then take off, take all his tools, take all the materials, and never be seen from again. So as you can imagine, this is a very painful lesson to learn, especially when it's right in the beginning and you don't have a lot of financial wherewithal and you could potentially lose your business with one really bad deal like this. So luckily that didn't happen, but I learned sort of, I guess, 4 key lessons from this whole experience. So the first one is, obviously, if you're hiring a general contractor, you have to make sure that they are paying the subs. So, either you're paying the subs directly and you're buying the material, or every time you get a payment, you're verifying with, even if it's their guys, you think it's their guys, a lot of times it's probably just subs that they're paying as a subcontractor. It's not like an employee on their payroll. You need to confirm that money is getting to those guys, because at the end of the day, if the GC splits, they're going to put a lien on your property and you're ultimately responsible to pay that sub because they did the work to your house. The second lesson, and this is something that I tell new investors all the time, is that you can't make a liar honest through paperwork. So I had all the documentation, I had all the paperwork in the world, I had a detailed scope of work, I had a contractor statement. I didn't have the lien waivers that I should have had in place that said that he was paying the subs and the subs signed off. That was the one thing I didn't have, but I had a ton of contracts in place stating all the agreements, all the penalties for getting behind, all that stuff. None of it matters. If you're working with a liar, eventually they are going to find some chink in the armor and they're going to manipulate that and they are going to take their shot and they're going to take as much money from you as possible. So the biggest thing you can do is to screen for honesty up front and work with someone whose values align to yours, and that will eliminate 99% of the problems right up front. So the third lesson is, even if you're working with someone who's honest, if they're extremely disorganized and they struggle to manage their finances, your likelihood of getting screwed goes way up. It goes through the roof, because eventually what happens is they'll take on one project and they'll get through that project, but then they'll take on multiple projects at the same time. And eventually they're taking payments and paying their bills with payments that should have gone towards materials and labor on a project. And then they get a little bit behind, so they take on the next project and the payments for that project are going to pay the first. And then, they take on another one and they get way ahead. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and eventually the music will stop. At some point, the music will stop. They'll be so far behind that when the music finally stops, you're not the only one getting screwed over. There's a whole line of people getting screwed over. And even if they had great intentions to start with, if it is between paying for materials or paying their bills or paying for groceries for their family, they're going to choose to pay their bills. Even if their intention was good all along and they didn't intend to be a liar, they were put in that position because they just can't manage their finances. So you want to confirm that they actually have some organization and some level of financial management before you hire that contractor. Finally, the last lesson out of this was that if you think your backstop is that, well, if he screws me, I'll sue him, you should probably think again. A lawsuit, most likely in almost all circumstances, especially with rehabbers who are working with a lot of contractors who are like hand to mouth or fly by night type contractors who really just don't have any assets to back them up, there's really no sense in suing them. So I learned that on this particular project. I felt like I got slapped in the face, and I called an attorney and said, we need to go after this guy. I was so angry. And so we pursued him, and it took so much time, so much energy, so much life force that I could have been putting toward other projects and other meaningful things instead of pursuing this dirt bag. And at the end of the day, we ended up settling, and I think I got like $10,000 or $12,000, which was just enough to pay the attorney all the fees, and I basically made nothing. So I would have been much better off just licking my wounds, going a separate way, learning my lesson, and never doing this again. But my advice would be never to think of a lawsuit as a good backstop to protect you, because most likely that's not going to be the case if that ever happens. My second biggest real estate investing mistake is primarily focusing on flips in the beginning. For the first several years, pretty much flips are all I did. So from 2011 to 2016, I did just over 70 real estate projects, and almost all of them were flips. And looking back, this was a time period where the market was really appreciating. So, it helped me on the flips, but the problem was every time I flipped a project, I kind of equate flipping projects to being sort of a crack addict. You get your fix, you find a deal, maybe it goes well, you feel good, and then as soon as it's done, you got to find that next deal, right? It doesn't pay you in perpetuity. You get, it's like one and done. Now, looking back at those 70 deals, when I evaluate them, most of those deals were profitable. We made money on most of those deals, but once we made that money, we had to pay taxes on that money, and then again, we were back looking for the next deal. So when I think about what we sold each of those properties for from 2011 to 2016, some of the sale prices on those properties, the after repair value, it's $50,000 to $100,000 higher today than the price that we sold it for. So had we kept that property, not only would we probably have made a little bit in cash flow, but we would have accumulated a massive amount of equity over that time period. Now, I know it's not logical, it's not feasible to keep every single property all the time, because a lot of people are living off the income from the flips, right? Or from doing wholesale deals. So you can't always keep every property, but if you're just doing flips, maybe it's time to incorporate some rental properties, maybe do 2 flips and then hold a property so that 10 years from now, you're not looking back saying, man, I could have accumulated hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity and cash flow had I kept some of those flips that I was so focused on doing at the time. The third biggest real estate investing mistake that I made is not doing digital marketing much sooner. So if you're an old school marketer, if you're just doing direct mail or signs or cold calls or newspaper ads, then this mistake is directed toward you. Hopefully this will help you. Hopefully you'll learn from it. I've just recently started to understand digital marketing a little bit. I'm still not great at it, but I can already see the massive shift that this is having in my business. So I'm not saying that the old school methods of marketing don't work. If you're doing old school methods, that's great. I think there's a place for those. All I'm saying is that you should incorporate in digital marketing. So the biggest advantage of digital marketing is that it's cumulative, right? So if you send a mailer to somebody, the minute they read it, then it's dead, really. It's a sunk cost, right? Either they're going to respond or they're not. But that's it. The mailer dies there. If you do a digital ad, or you create some helpful piece of content, or you share something, every time someone gets value out of it, or they reply, or they like it, it signals to those platforms, to Facebook or YouTube or Google, that this is a valuable piece of content, that it should be promoted and that more people should see it. So it has this sort of perpetual cumulative effect. So in other words, let's say, for example, I spend $1,000 a month on direct mail. And let's just say that $1,000 brings in X number of deals. Let's say it brings in 1 deal per month. So at the end of the year, I've spent $12,000 on direct mail, and it's brought me 12 new deals. Now, I could do that, but then at that point, that marketing is dead. You might have a few stragglers that keep your letter and they call you a few months later, but beyond that, it's pretty much dead. However, I could spend that $12,000 on digital marketing. Maybe it's ads, or maybe it's content creation. And I could feasibly get 12 new deals from that. My ads could push people to my website where there's content, and they could fill out a form, and I could convert them that way. So it's the same $12,000 spent on marketing that brings in 12 deals, but I'm in a very different place at the end of the year spending it on digital marketing. You know, at the end of the year, all of a sudden, now my SEO is improved. So my search ranking is much higher when people search for, you know, sell my house in Northwest Indiana where I'm located. I'm gonna be one of the first ones that pop up because I've done a bunch of digital marketing around it. I also most likely have a year's worth of content that I can continue to refer people to, and it will continue to pay off for me. And finally, the reach of my digital marketing goes way beyond just my intended recipient, you know, the seller. Now I've got a much wider reach. All my friends know that I'm a guy who buys houses. I'm a real estate investor. I'm sort of the subject matter expert. So I'm getting additional deals just by word of mouth, just by having a wider reach that I never would have got by sending a direct mail piece directly to my intended seller. It's this cumulative effect that I wish I had tapped into about a decade ago when I was first getting started, and it's something I recommend if you're just getting started now, start doing. You know, you don't have to just rely on digital marketing because it takes a little while to get it up and running, but definitely incorporate it with some of those more old school marketing tactics. This video is a great example of a digital marketing piece. This is going to provide value to someone, and it's going to live on, and eventually it will expand my reach, and something like this will probably lead to getting more deals in the future. And it's not necessarily intuitive that a video that you're creating that helps other investors might lead to more deals, but that's the net effect that it has when you create digital marketing that continues to live on. So hopefully today my pain has been your education, and this video helps you to avoid some of those real estate investing landmines that are out there. If you did enjoy this video, hit subscribe and you'll get notified of future videos. We release videos on a weekly basis. Also, we have a really great Facebook community, the Living Off Rentals Facebook group. Go over to Facebook, join the group, ask your questions. You know, a lot of great rental property investors hang out there. Also, I'd love to hear any comments or questions that you have below. I can make a video on whatever topic is most relevant to people. So I love hearing feedback on these videos. I love hearing questions that you have so that I can make videos on the most relevant topics. And finally, there's a couple of links to some free resources in the description below that should help you with your rental property investing journey. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next video.